All right, well, thank you for joining us, Wesley. Really
It's
appreciate
fun to be here.
I want to start by talking a little bit about how you got here. Tell us, you have an unconventional background and story, I think, from a lot of people in venture. So tell us a little bit about that and how you got to where you are.
It's it's a series of very crazy accidents, right? I never wanted to. I didn't even know I was going to work in tech. I thought I was going to work for the government after I left school. But I decided that like if not 2/3 of my graduating class majored in computer science when I was at MIT, and so I was like, why don't I try that? And I didn't even know how to program a computer back then, and wound up getting a degree in computer science. And I said, like, I'm going to go try my hand at tech, not the government, and wound up coming to Silicon Valley. And something very interesting happened around the time I graduated. It was called the dot-com crash. So everybody started laying off people and stopped hiring tech people. No engineers, nothing. People went into investment banking, consulting, but not tech. And when I moved out to the Valley, I was like, oh crap, there's no jobs out here. I screwed up big time, and I timed my entry into Silicon Valley terribly. And then there was one company hiring, and it was this tiny startup called Google. It was the one sort of company left standing, and when I got there, they were like, "Ooh, we need your help to figure out how to make money. We're still trying to figure out how to make payroll." So I got to write the ad system and spent 15 years building the ad system, starting Google Analytics, helping buy YouTube. I wound up starting Google Voice, helping bring Android into the company, and then it grew really big, really big.
Yeah.
There's like hundreds of people when I joined, and when I told Sergey in 2009 or 2010 I was going to leave and I want to go build a startup.
How did he decide to go into venture?
Yeah. He said, like, look, don't leave. I'll happily back whatever you're doing, but you need to go buy toilet paper if you're going to do a startup. I had to go buy toilet paper for Google. You do not like buying toilet paper. You do not like picking out health insurance. You do not want to pick up 401ks. Like we do that for you here. I have one less chapter for you. And he said, go work with Bill Maris. Go work with Rich Miner. Go start this thing called Google Ventures. And so I got this opportunity to sort of learn how to do venture from the ground up, and I've been very fortunate to have been trained by several Google board members, John Doerr and Mike Moritz, who were on Google's board, who led the Series A, and who wanted Google Ventures to succeed. And I spent 5 years there helping to build out Google Ventures, doing companies like Plaid and Robinhood and Gusto and so forth. And then I wound up, spending the last 15 years investing in venture. All complete accident, right? Like, all perfect. It's because I was born in a certain year, the dot-com crash. You just don't know when timing sort of says, you should go do this.
And even tell us a little bit about your journey to MIT in the first place. I mean, that's a very unconventional story.
Yeah, I was a terrible high school student, really bad. I mean, I was like a B- C+ student. My parents were first-generation immigrants from Hong Kong, very sort of humble. So I wound up having to work 2-3 jobs in high school to support the family. I got this great job. I grew up in Southern California, and there was I found a job cleaning beakers at a college that was nearby.
Okay.
And then, I wound up being promoted, I guess, in some sense, to helping do research at this place, and wound up discovering how to turn stem cells into red blood cells as part of this research project. And, it turns out MIT takes students that, know how to do research versus bad high school students. So, I got very lucky. And again, complete accident.
So the reason I'm sort of going into this is when you're looking at companies that you think are going to be successful, there is an element of luck involved.
It's almost all luck, right?
Are there things that you can do, though, to position yourself to take advantage of lucky breaks as they come? Like, you have to be, we all have those breaks that we've passed on.
It's all timing, right? Larry and Sergey, I was Sergey's chief of staff for 5 years, and so I got to be very close to the two founders at Google when I was there, and this is part-time, right? Like, I had to go build the ad system while helping them figure out how to run the company. And I still remember Larry and Sergey telling me, like, if we started Google 6 months earlier or 6 months later, there would be no Google, right? Like, if we timed it at this right moment when all the search engines were tricking people on how to stay on for very long amounts of time, right? If you remember, there were 20 other search engines. Google was, they were all portals, right? There were 20 search engines, and their entire business model was to trick you to stay on, right? Like, you'd go do a search, you look for a restaurant review, maybe I'd look you up on your bio because, we're about to do this panel together, and instead of getting your bio back, I get upsold on how to do fantasy football, horoscopes, or weather reports. reports. And I really don't want a weather report or fantasy football when I'm like looking something up I'm going to get off quickly. And here comes Larry and Sergey going, we have a different business model. It's a blank web page with two buttons, one search bar, and we want to get you off as quickly as humanly possible in 10 seconds and 2 clicks. That was heresy back then when everybody else was making models of punch to monkey ads.
Although I will say that Google today has perhaps
they've changed.
rediscovered the wheel.
I'm not there anymore.
We're not going to go there anymore.
But,
Okay.
and it's AI, but like my point on this is that there's that lucky moment of timing, and this goes back to your question. Like luck matters a lot, but the best founders who know how to push luck in their favor really have a keen sense of why timing matters and what they're doing.
Is there a way you can, are there things you can do to open yourself up to those opportunities? Is it a matter of taking a lot of shots? Is it a matter of picking something and committing to it?
So I'm very different in the venture capital industry. A lot of people go like, let me go to TechCrunch Disrupt or let me go to Y Combinator Demo Day, and I'll meet a bunch of founders, and maybe one of them will be the one I back, right? And I kind of look for founders that remind me of Larry and Sergey, right? You know, having spent 15 years at Google, 5 of them up close with Larry and Sergey as Sergey's chief of staff. Like, there's a couple interesting patterns that evolve. One is that, you know, the best founders, if you look at my track record and the successful companies that have become decacorns or this, like, that you read about every day on TechCrunch, like Canva, you know, where I led the Series A, like, they just like founders that have this very, very, very clear sense of understanding about what they want to do and why the world will change if what they build comes true, right? Larry and Sergey knew that the world would change if Google came true, if the world moved from, you know, these portals that were like, you know, annoying everybody down to a web page and with that was ultra fast and getting you off, right? Better user experience, the world will change. That's what we look for, is people who have a clear sense of timing and massive clarity on why the world will change when they do that. So, you know, I would say go solve something or think about something that you've been thinking about your entire life.
And you almost passed on Canva, right? People told you it was
111
crazy.
people said no.
Yeah.
100 people said no. I remember getting there in front of Cliff and Mel and meeting them in Australia. I was very fortunate to be in Australia because I had a company called Contrarian I was at a board meeting for in Melbourne. And if not for the fact that I had 3 people whisper me going, these people are quirky, they're really smart, massive clarity, you should at least grab a coffee with them. I still remember they opened up the meeting and said 111 people said no to us. We don't need money, we don't want money, we don't need you. But we're happy you're here, we'll make you a coffee. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, that's a crazy way to open a pitch.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've never had a founder say like 111 people passed on me, we don't need money.
Now everybody who's listening to this is going to be doing this.
Yeah, and I sat there going like, well, that was
the anti-pitch is.
Yeah, and I was sat there and I'm like, well, that was a kind of a waste of time. And then I heard their vision, I heard their clarity. Mel had this amazing clarity on why the world would change if Canva came through. Her unique insight, and again, I listened for the unique insight, right, was that all the tools, Microsoft Office, Adobe Photoshop, all the tools were about text first, right? Like if you went and made a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation, you'd put the text in the document, and then you'd try to figure out how to put a picture or like put some design in it, or you'd send it out to a designer, right? Like it was all about bullet points first and then the text. And then she's like, everybody's grown up with the iPhone. A lot of people have the iPhone. It's about image and design first, right? You don't go to Instagram and go like type in an essay and then go figure out a picture to put with it. You put the picture first and then write maybe a mini caption with some hashtags underneath of it. And an entire generation of people under 35 had grown up understanding the iPhone, image first, design first. And she said, I need to make something for them that really allows them to focus on the image first. It was like that aha moment that Larry and Sergey had about getting people off the website in 10 seconds and 2 clicks. Like she had that insight. And everybody thought she was batshit crazy. Right? Oh, Adobe has all this money. Microsoft, 35 years of being around and hundreds of millions of people using it. Why the hell do they need Canva? And I sat there going like, well, what if she's right?
Yeah.
And she was.
That's a good question. That sort of leads into something. There are a lot of times when, you know, a startup is starting to get some traction. What prevents a big company from just saying, oh, we can clone that feature? And how come
Nothing.
It never works?
Oh.
It never works.
Oh, God, I tried to do this hundreds of times at Google, right? Like, I was a product guy at Google, and my job was to go look at, oh, this thing is a feature. I should just add it to AdWords. I should go add it to Google Voice. I should go add it to Google Analytics. And many times we would just, sort of build it and then destroy markets. It's very terrible, right? Like, think about Google Analytics. I launched Google Analytics as the founder of Google Analytics. There are hundreds of companies doing analytics back then, right? Omniture, all these things, and we launched it and we gave it away for free. Yep. And then, that whole market, like Google, I think had 80% plus market share of that market after we did that, right? I feel bad for the companies that didn't quite make it, but like Google built a great product and we were able to get distribution so that won in that market. Like Google could do that, but the problem is unless there's somebody crazy hyper-focused on that, or you have your best guys who are just basically say, I know what the market market needs. I'm Larry and Sergey, I'm Steve Jobs, like reincarnated. Like, it's really hard for that company to do it because you have a lot of crazy pressures that are internally. I helped bring YouTube to Google, right? I was on the team that helped diligence it. And one of the things, we had Google Video at that point, and the Google Video team was focused on building a product for the networks, right? Like, oh, like we have DRM, we have no sharing. It had all this friction, and here's YouTube with their cat videos that everybody was like, oh, there's no friction in uploading and everything. And then eventually they had to go solve all the problems with DRM later on. But like, if you thought about it, that was a superior product to whatever Google had built.
So you go with the user experience first, and then you figure out the legalities later. Because I mean, YouTube launched, and there was a lot.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that when you're a startup. When you're not a startup, like you get lawsuits, and no, that's not good.
Yeah. So you invested in. We'll just keep going with Canva in the Series A. What are the sort of pitfalls and struggles to get between that very small stage to that unicorn and beyond status? What are some common things that people have to go through, and how do they have to navigate those things? What do you look out for?
One of the difficult things, especially on companies like Canva, is distribution, right? Whether you're an enterprise software project, AI, or whatever else, you got to figure out how to get this in the hands of people. And in the crowded market, when there's lots of noise, when you have a choice of office or whatever else, like you have to figure out why people want to use it and how people find out about your product. And there's a couple ways to do this, right? One is product-led growth, which is what Canva did. They would get 5 users for every 1 word-of-mouth user, and then they'd do all these very creative things, like put free templates online so that when you search for business cards or like Instagram posts, like, you'd find it and be first on the search result, and then, you'd share it with 5 other or 10 other people, and they'd find out about it. It was very viral. Or you go pay Instagram influencer, like have a paid marketing campaign, and that's very expensive. And I think a lot of challenges for founders in the early stages that they raise money and then they spend it all in 18 months buying growth, but there's no reason for people to stay on it or engage in the product or tell other people, and then you burn all your money and you go like, oh, I need to raise another round.
So like in the enterprise space, are you a big fan of land and expand, right? People bring it into work, love it so much that they say you have to use this. The other method is you hire a bunch of expensive salespeople and go play golf with the CIO.
And sometimes that works, right? Like, there are companies I've invested in where, they've built this amazing sales engine and it works really, really well. But most of the great companies are capital efficient and tend to find a way to continue having the company or having the enterprise expand. There was a company called SourceGraph I invested in, right, when I was in my previous firm, and that's classic land and expand, right? A small engineering team would start using it, and then everybody else would find out about code search and go like, oh my god, I need this too, and then it would just spread across the whole company, and then it would expand massively, right? I like those better because they tend to be way more capital efficient, and every year the contract value goes up, and you sit there going like, oh, this could be big.
That's great. So what are some of the other things? I imagine that there are a number of transitional stages if you're a founder in a sort of a hyper-growth company where you have to start giving things up. Is that hard to navigate for people? And are you able to advise people on that, or do you just say founder mode all the way, do everything as long as you can?
Well, I think the best founders really want to go build a big business, and sometimes they know what their weaknesses are, right? Like at Google, the MO there was let's do everything ourselves, and then eventually we'll find people who are better and more excited about doing this. And better at it than we are when we need to expand. Like, it's like the toilet paper problem. Like, you buy it as a founder at the beginning, and then you find somebody more interested in it who's better or who does it professionally buying toilet paper, and you don't need to go worry about that anymore. The best founders know when that moment is, right? Like, I think that a lot of when folks that raise money think that at the beginning they need to go have the toilet paper guy just hired right away, even though they don't quite need it. And that burns a lot of money, right? Like we had one of the problems with the zero interest rate period that we had before the pandemic is that money was easy to get. No diligence deals. People were throwing term sheets that empty valuations on there to let the founder write it in, and people would raise $100, $200, $300 million in the SoftBank era, right? And I still remember some of these companies like raising a little too much and then eventually hiring and overbloating, only to sit there and go like, wait, we got nothing out of the money that we spent over the last 18 months. Like, guess when that happened again with .com, boom and crash, right? Like, people raised all this money, and then we have no real business, we made no progress, and then sort of imploded. And the problem was when the market turns. It's that old quote that Warren Buffett used to say, or Charlie Munger, like when the tide goes out, we don't know who's wearing pants, and a lot of people weren't wearing pants.
Have you seen the opposite, where a founder will try and hold on too long?
Yeah.
And how do you? Can you talk someone out of that, or how do you?
No.
Okay.
It's really tough. It's not my job is to pick great founders who want to go and build, a world-changing company. Larry and Sergey, very quickly gave up being CEO of Google, right? They brought Eric Schmidt in, but they still had the areas of the company under their control they cared about most, which was product. And Eric would help with distribution. He would help with bringing meat and running the business area of Google. And he was brilliant at it. And he was a great face of the company because he was, he'd been seasoned CEO. Mm-hmm. But Larry and Sergey cared deeply about the engineering and about the technology, and they held very, very, very tight control of that. But they created a system that works. And I could just imagine that moment when John Doerr and Mike Moritz and the Google board said, like, you guys shouldn't be CEO. Like, there are people, you're running an ads business at some point, and you need these advertisers to trust in you. And so the best founders know that moment, and they say, like, look, I totally get it. I want to go bring in somebody, whether it's a CEO or whatever the model works, to help them. It's my job to help enable that when they're ready for it, but not my job to force it through. Like but there are many VCs that do this, right? Like legendary, like sit there. These are like episodes of Silicon Valley where the CEO and the founder and the investors have like crazy power struggles, and that never works for me, right? Like I sit there going, like, dude, it's your dream, not mine. My job is to help you accomplish the dream.
One of the things that you talked about when you talked to TechCrunch earlier this year was the power of being lonely and the power of being comfortable with being lonely. Being a founder is a very lonesome journey. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and why?
Yeah, I watched Larry and Sergey really build Google, and there were moments where they had to make decisions that the company didn't really agree with, right? Like, they would get everybody's feedback. They'd, have the TGIFs or their famous cafe gatherings, but they said, like, we got to make this decision, and the decision really rests on them, right? Like, there's like a decision to go work with Yahoo and do their search. And I still remember that. The whole company sat there up in arms going, we're not ready, we can't scale, and we can't go do this. It's going to wreck the company if you go sign and do Yahoo search, right? Larry and Sergey's like, look, this is one moment in time, we got to seize the opportunity. They did it, and the whole company rallied behind them, right? They're able to get, but it's a very lonely decision when you go, like, boy, like, I could wreck the company on this business. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the same thing for me, right? Like, Google Analytics was massively unpopular. They called it Wesley's Folly at Google when I, like, started it because, like, it was enterprise software. Most people don't understand that the reason why Google gave it away for free wasn't because, like, we was like, oh, what a great product, we should be for free in everybody's hand, is that the billing team was busy working on AdWords and didn't want to build a billing engine to go look at page views, right? So here we are going, like, well, it's going to take 2 years for them to build a billing engine. I'm like number 28 on their priority list. Let's get it away. Sergey was like, well, if you want to get it out there, get it away for free. So my point to you on this is that, like, you got to sometimes make these decisions where it's lonely, the world disagrees with you, and a lot of people, we're evolutionarily bred to not want exile, right? Like, we want to be popular, we want to be with our friends, we want to be in the thing, like, hundreds of thousands of years ago, we were exiled, but the lions would eat you, right? Yeah. And so, like, being lonely is a hard business, and, like, if you want to be a great investor, if you want to, like, go do things that change the world, sometimes the world doesn't agree with you, and you'd be okay with that.
Are you able to sort of identify that quality in founders, like, where they have such a strength of conviction that you're convinced they're going to be?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's clarity, right? Like, you ask the question, why will the world change if what you're doing is right? And, like, the best founders, like Cliff and Mel had a great answer, the Plaid founding team had a great answer, even, like, Josh Reeves at Gusto, great answer, like, payroll, right? Like, I'm like, wow, how is the world going to change from payroll? What's wrong with payroll today? ADP has the whole market, and here he is, $10 billion decacorn, changing payroll, like, we use it. So my point is that the best founders have that clarity, and it's sometimes, like, people sit there and go, like, I don't believe you, or, like, you're full of crap, like, I don't want to back you, and Cliff and Mel went through that. 111 people said no to them. They had to be okay being lonely.
Right. And so when did you go out on your own? When did you start your own fund? Was that a couple years ago?
It was 3 years ago. Yeah, I still remember. I was like, it's time to hang my. I've been telling people I wanted to go start something. Yeah, I told Sergey I wanted to go build a company, and now I said it's time to hang my hat on my own shingle.
Yeah. Well, how was that for you, and why did you finally do it? Like, what was the spurring moment?
Like, look, I do venture very uniquely, right? Like, I love backing the founders for life. I love being one of their first phone calls, and a lot of folks don't agree with that way, or don't practice that artisanal boutique way of building these deep relationships with founders, right? Most of the founders I backed in my 10 plus years of doing venture, became LPs in my fund, right? They're coaches to the next generation of founders. They don't have time to be everybody's coaches, right? Like, Cliff and Mel can't take every phone call that comes their way, but, like, when we send them folks, they'll spend time with our founders, and we're very, very, very grateful, and I'm sure the founders that we back are grateful that they have access to folks like Cliff and Mel and others. The reason I wanted to go do this was really about, like, look, I practice venture differently. It's hard being lonely. When you can only make money when you're in this business really by being contrarian. You have to be lucky on contrarian, right? Or right in contrarian. And, like, to be contrarian, you're lonely. And then when you have, like, big teams and whatever else at other places, you may not be able to, practice that contrarian way of doing ventures. You can only really do that when, like Larry and Sergey, when you have your own business and you sort of can bring in people that see the world the way you see it.
Yeah, it's always hard advice to be contrarian and convicted, because sometimes the idea is wrong. Like, have you ever had that situation where someone was like, this seems like a great idea?
Yeah, many times. Like, I launched many great products at Google, but, like, I had a lot of bad duds too. Like,
yeah.
The beautiful thing in
when
venture
do you
capital.
know? When do you know?
Well, the market tells you quickly. Yeah, you get a little embarrassed, like, it becomes a dud. Sometimes the market will surprise you, but most of the time the market gives you that feedback quickly. But here's the thing about being contrarian or like having duds. I'm in the nature of venture capital, very early stage venture capital. I focus on Series A. I'm okay having duds. Like 9 out of 10 companies will, if you're a good Series A venture investor, will become duds or zeros. The one that becomes Canva, like, makes your career. Yeah. All you need is one, right? And so the nature of failure, and Google trained you to fail, right? Like lots of things Google does, or in the early days, were complete duds, right? And like, in fact, I still remember Bill Campbell, who's a legendary coach. He trained Larry and Sergey, he trained Steve Jobs, he trained Jeff Bezos at Amazon. And he sat there, he goes, Wesley, we're okay with you making mistakes here at Google. We want you to make the $1 million mistakes. In fact, you need to make a bunch of $1 million mistakes. But if the $1 billion opportunity comes and you make a mistake, you're out. Don't F that up. So don't make the $1 billion mistake. Make the $1 billion mistake so you don't make the $1 billion, you don't futz the $1 billion opportunity when it comes.
Right.
And that's literally my business of venture capital. We do a lot of deals, we learn. We're okay having the failures. But when Canva comes along and I say no, I'm one of those 111 people, like, boy, am I going to kick myself in the ass.
Are there any that you can talk about where you passed and you should have taken it?
Oh my God!
In retrospect, you're like, of course, so obvious.
I passed in the early days of Uber, right? Like, Brian Graves came to Google Ventures. I saw the seed, and I didn't understand. It was a black card booking business, and I'm like, how many people use black cards at the airport? Like, nobody. And it wasn't until, and eventually Google Ventures did do the Series C at Uber, right? But that was when UberX became a thing, and we never understood the vision for UberX, or like that you could like create this mobile app that would help people book cars. Like, there are just moments where where the clarity isn't either there, or like you miss the clarity, or you like are an idiot and don't believe that what the founder can do is true. So, I think about those moments every day. This is a business of imperfect information. You got to do the best job making that information, but you're going to be wrong a lot. Sure. And I'm okay with that. That's, in fact, if I'm not wrong, I'm not taking the right amount of risk.
So when we talk about unicorns and decacorns and so forth, the valuation on paper isn't real until there's an exit, right? I mean, it's real, but it's not really real. So when you're thinking about exits in the landscape today, what are...
There are no exits, let's be honest, right?
Well,
like, yeah, secondaries, but the IPO market shut down. We're telling people they have to have 500 million of revenue now, or ARR, to become an IPO company. Oh, that's rare. And you have to have like 40% year-over-year growth. The markets are non-functional, right? We don't have an M&A exit. The FTC has been prosecuting everything. Every big company is afraid of bringing in a company and then having like a Figma situation happen where it doesn't pass. It's shut down. It will recover, right? We have an election coming up. Either way, it's likely that FTC chair is going to change. Then we have hopefully interest rates going down so the public markets recover. But right now we're in this terrible, crappy period. There's no exits.
That's what I was going to ask you: is what are buyers looking for? And the answer is nothing.
There's a few AI things happening, but for the most part, and even if you look at some of these AI companies that are exiting, there's all this weird structure in the deal where the founders make out like bandits because they get the crazy earnouts, but it's like an IP exit rather than a company exit, and the investors get 2 or 3 extra money back to keep them happy. But that's a failure for any venture investor to make 3 extra money, right? So it's one of those things where we're in this weird period of lull. But the one unique insight that I have in my business, the markets always recover. There were no exits when I started at Google. The IPO market was shut down in 2001. Google reopened it in 2004, right? Sarbanes-Oxley, Enron had effed up the whole thing for the whole market, and then basically they had to create all these new laws to keep all this shenanigans from happening again. And I still remember one of my jobs at Google was to go figure out how to help Google handle Sarbanes-Oxley, which we didn't know how to exit.
Massive.
And then they solved it and they reopened the IPO market. It comes back. My bets I place for 5 to 7 years out in the future, right? I don't care about tomorrow's exits. I care about what happens 5 years from now. And my bet is, and I hope everybody's bet in this audience, is that the exits recover and we start seeing great activity again where people can make money in this business.
So how long do you think people are going to have? What kind of runway are they going to have, or when are they going to, how much cash flow positivity for, when do you have to?
The big problem, even though we hear about these billion-dollar funds being raised, it's really, look, and zero interest rates. If you left Facebook or you left Google and you had maybe 2 angel investments, somebody would give you $50 million to have a fund. That's all done, all shut down, right? You get so freaking hard to raise money. I raised 3 years ago in 2022, or 2.5 years ago in 2022, and the market was melting down at that point, right? I had 5 friends out trying to raise too, and most of them weren't able to do it. Thank goodness I had Canva, right? But the market, the LPs are basically saying we got over-indexed, we got burned in zero interest rates. We gave too much money to these funds doing these no diligence deals, right? No diligence, we outsourced it to Bain Capital or to McKinsey, and then we'll give you a term sheet. And all those guys are out of the market today. We had a fleeing of capital out of the market, or the capital that's being allocated today is going to top firms or what LPs think is safety. Is a safe bet on a venture capitalist with long track records. So it's going to take some time for that to really feel itself out and figure it out. So, people need to be very, very capital constrained. Like the only exception to the rule right now is in AI, but like, we saw what happened in the dot-com boom, right? Like,
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. That is sort of the area where we're still seeing some incredibly rich valuations. How long does that last?
I mean, it lasted for 6 years in the dot-com boom, right? Like, we had rich valuations for 10 plus years and 0 interest rates. Like, when there's an overflow of capital, or it's the easy thing to do, like, people rush into it, right? Like, and we said, look what happened in crypto, right? A lot of people rushed into it, and a lot of people got burned.
Yeah. What are you sort of looking at in terms of sectors right now that are interesting beyond AI? If you think, everybody's following AI.
So,
does climate come back? Deep tech? Something completely
So
different?
the answer is I don't know, right? Like, I index on amazing founders who are mission-driven that remind me of Larry and Sergey, and I keep an open mind, whatever sector they're in, right? Like, if I were looking for a thesis-driven thing in design, like, I would not have done design software. I would have like sat there and said like, ooh, Adobe's well-funded, Microsoft has this monopoly in Office. Like, you guys have 0 chance, man, to do it. I would have been the 112th no. And, but because I index in founder, I always keep an open mind. Just like how there were 22 search engines, and here comes these 2 crazy founders out of Stanford, Larry and Sergey, going like, oh, we're gonna build a search engine that's faster than everybody else, and we have no way of making money. So the irony is that we've been doing venture investing for 3 years of the new fund. Our 2 best companies are life science companies, right? Like, that always recovers faster than everything else. People still will get ill, and drugs are going to be highly valuable because they cure some disease that people are suffering from. So that's where we're putting a lot of effort, and AI is helping get to some of these drugs faster. So we look for things off the beaten path, right?
How do you meet and find founders, or asking on behalf of the audience, how do they get in front of you?
They don't. I mean, like, I'll be honest. Like, there are only 2 of us at the firm, right? We can't go take every cold email or every pitch or every person that shows up at the door. So the best founders come to us through our other founders, right? Like, they build something, we either notice or our founders notice, and they go, Wes, you got to meet this guy. Like, the product's incredible. We're using it at our board meetings. We're using it at our companies. I have it on my iPhone, right? Or, we meet them through our network where one of our founders really says, like, I'm putting some money in this guy, like, he's amazing, like, it blew my mind away. When a founder says that to me, I was like, I need to go meet this person too, right? Like, that's how we can filter out, the hundreds and thousands of folks. I'm not the guy that sort of shows up at, Disrupt and like says, thinks I'll find the next Canva here. It might happen. Yeah. People forget I found Plaid at the TechCrunch Disrupt in New York, right? Like, I found Zach and, or they found me, right? Like, it really came to one of my, I was doing the New York Disrupt after party back in 2010, I think. Yeah. And they showed up, right? And they kind of were really charismatic and said, and I somehow gave them a term sheet.
What impressed you about them?
They really understood like how messed up like logging your bank account was, right? And I kind of sat there going like, hey, what if they're right? We got this Yodely thing and everything else, and they really made an interesting pitch at the bar at the after party. That was like the one exception. I don't think there's been any other sort of moment where it wasn't a founder that said, you got to meet this person. It's great. Even Canva, right? It came from the contrarian founder who whispered to me and said, like, they're quirky, but I think we're building something amazing. Like, you should meet them. I'll sure it's small. I'll call them up. And thank God he's made that introduction, right? If they reached out cold, I would have been very confused.
Yeah. So if you're a founder, you're starting something, how do you build that network? What's the most important thing? Is it just build the greatest product and word of mouth will carry you? Or is it important to meet people and like...
Yeah, it is important to meet people. I mean, like, look, it's part of the game, right? Like, you have to, and you got to hustle, but you can't like expect that the hustle will save you. You have to. The best founders that I've backed, the Cliff and Mel's and the Plaids, the Canvas, the Gustos, the Flexports, they've all built product first, right? They understand product, they understand go to market, and they've thought about this problem their entire life. Like Ryan Peterson at Flexport, like had been doing import-export his whole life, and like was a consultant for lots of companies trying to get their product in from China. He understood how terrible that supply chain thing was, and then he said, I'm going to build Flexport to solve this. They were able to build a network along the way and convince a bunch of people to back them. I was doing very, very early stage, first check investing back when Ryan founded Flexport, so I was lucky enough to meet him at a YC event, and he just blew my mind away. But a friend of mine introduced me to Ryan and said, you got to meet, you got to hear what he's doing, right? So that network and that like hustle matters a lot, and there are a bunch of people that are doing today what I used to do when I was back at GV, which is doing early stage seed investing. If you get some of them excited about what you're doing and they fund you and you start making progress and your product takes off, one of them will say, Wes, you got to meet him.
What do you think about sort of career experience? Is it important to have worked at a large company? Is it important to have worked at a particular company in the domain that you're interested in, or can you just start fresh if you have the knowledge?
Look,
do you have anything in common there?
Across all the founders I've invested, like, no, there's nothing in common. Like, what is in common is they understand the product in the domain space better than anyone else, right? Well, they didn't go discover it at like they didn't go like pivot 8 different times and like, figure it out at YC demo day and change everything else. They really thought about their entire lives, right? If you think about Larry and Sergey, it was their PhD research. Like PageRank, which was like what Google was based on, was named after Larry Page, right? Like if you think about like Ryan at Flexport, same thing, right? The journey is that they've experienced the product somehow, they've experienced the problem somehow, and they know more about it than anyone else, and they have a unique insight why the world will change. That's what we index on and what we look for. Not everybody does that, right? But that's what I found, lets me find these great companies. They've nailed product and they have a unique insight on it. So if you get that insight at a great company and like, you've worked on this your entire life and you said, the world sucks, I can't believe people are like doing whatever this way. I like experienced it firsthand at like, Chevron or whatever else, that's great, right? We want to hear that insight. If you discover it and it's your PhD research, we want to hear about it too, right? But like usually you understand this better than everything else. This isn't something you randomly like read about on the New York Times that morning going, oh, I'm gonna go fix this. That doesn't work, that never works for me.
Any parting words of advice for potential founders who want to build a unicorn? What is the one thing you hope that?
It's actually interesting, right? Like every founder I've backed wants to go build product first, and like they don't seek out being a unicorn. The unicorn follows, great product. I think that the people that like want to like innovate on business model and think that like the business model will allow them to be a unicorn winds up like hitting some sort of wall because like either you have to pay for distribution, you run out of cash, or there's something else that sort of happens. So the thing that I've found serves the founders I've been very lucky and fortunate to work with well is that they really truly believe that the product will change the world. They need some capital to go do it. They found capital efficient ways to get distribution, right? Because like you don't want to be competing in an arms race where like you need $100 million to go build your product to buy GPUs or to buy distribution or to pay off Instagram influencers or whatever else. Like they really want to invest it in product and they want to invest in engineering and they say like this will carry us for most of the day, and then only later on in their stage do they start thinking, well, okay, we need to juice up because we understand the ROI on every one of our users to like do paid marketing or paid acquisition. Those are the companies that tend to have outlier paths.
Great. Thank you so much, Wesley, for joining us.
Good. Thank you for having me.